America's Thanksgiving Parade presented by Art Van on Local 4.
Voters have rejected a regional mass transit system in the last 2 elections, but here it comes again. Will it be different this time without a major player going along? And the Detroit City Council sends a resounding no to Mayor Duggan on his request for a demolition bond. What now? Today is Sunday, November 24th, 2019, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. Good to have you with us as we head into such a big week every year in Detroit, as the parade will again do what it always does on Thanksgiving, and that's bring us together. And that is as important as ever after the impeachment hearings we've been through. It was another historic week in Washington, but we are going to set that aside this morning because it was also a very momentous week in Detroit. Sadly, the week included another name added to the ledger of brave Detroit police officers who've given their lives in the line of duty. 16 years of wearing the Detroit badge ended Wednesday night for Rasheen McClain, brought down by a gunman wielding a high-powered rifle. And our thoughts this morning are very much with the McClain family and with the larger family of blue that is hurting here in Detroit and police precincts everywhere. That was the same day we learned that the UAW was taking the corruption investigation into its own hands and bringing charges against now former President Gary Jones and Region 5 Director Vance Pearson. And as we were digesting that news, we learned General Motors was filing a jaw-dropping lawsuit against Chrysler Fiat, alleging corrupt bargaining tactics, especially through the late Sergio Marchionne. That doesn't even include developments on our topics this morning on Flashpoint. First, Mayor Duggan was asking the City Council to let voters decide on a $250 million demolition bond to keep those empty and dilapidated houses coming down in the city. But with intense public focus on it, the Council shot it down 6-3. We're going to talk not only about that and what it means for demolitions, but whether it marks a change in the mayor-council relationship. And mass transit is back for another try, though this time without Macomb County. Is it right to keep asking for another bite of the apple? It's all this morning on Flashpoint. During the last several years, almost 20,000 dilapidated homes and buildings have been brought down in a Detroit overrun by blight. So an easy sell to knock down that many more, right? Well, not exactly. City Council voted down the mayor's push for a demolition bond, and we see really the first fissure between the council and the mayor's office in some time. Let's talk about that and more with Stephen Henderson, back with us from Detroit Today on WDET. Kat Stafford is back with us. She's the government watchdog reporter for the Detroit Free Press. Former City Council member Sheila Cockrell is here, and so is Arthur Jemison, who heads up services and infrastructure for the city of Detroit, which means, Arthur, this entire matter of dilapidated homes is kind of right in your lane. Where do we go from here? What we have until, I guess, late in the day tomorrow for somebody on council to change their mind and want it reconsidered. Is that likely?
I've heard both that people are talking about it and also that they're not. I think what we're planning to do is to, focus and develop more specifics about the reforms we need to undertake as it pertains to the execution of demolition. We've also been spending a lot of time with council talking about the rehabilitation of housing and how we can prioritize that. Also ways that we can get the public and others involved in review and make sure there's a lot of public scrutiny on the work that we do. So we came up with, I think, a great resolution, and we're going to keep implementing it.
We saw a crazy public turnout for the hearing just before the vote, and I think we also heard a fair amount of skepticism because of some of the starts and stops and problems that the demolition program had early on, and I think this becomes a matter of trust and whether or not you've got this figured out now so that there's no more grand jury investigations that are going to pop up around this matter.
So our plan and has always been, as part of this demolition bond, to begin a reform effort with the way we do demolition. Our resolution brought demolition back in as a department in the city so that council would have a chance to do the oversight that they do. We also had a demolition review board that was going to get public folks involved in reviewing the actions of demolition. We also had goals about rehabilitation and really prioritizing Detroit-based businesses as the people doing the work. So we had a great sort of resolution going. In the end, I think people wanted more to be added to that, and we're planning to do that. But over the next, 30 to 60 days, we've got 3 or 4 work streams going that are going to result in us beginning to execute that reform agenda.
Kat, where do you suppose the real pushback on this is coming? Is it about the money? Is it about the way of doing it with a bond? Is it about suspicions about the way the work's already been done? What's going on?
I think what you saw over the course of this past week, and really since when the administration first brought this forward, were a lot of questions about transparency, accountability, and the way that the program has been handled in the past. And the very day that they were set to vote on this bond, you had the city's ombudsman come forward and really reveal yet another concern about the program. So I think a lot of the council members that I've spoken with, it's not a matter of do we want the houses to come down. I think everyone agrees that they do want the houses to come down, but a lot of folks really want to see a lot of these parameters in place before the bond gets on the ballot.
This is interesting, Sheila. It's really the first, as I mentioned, the first divide we've seen. This has been a very harmonious relationship so far between the council and the mayor. Is that changing at all?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's not unusual for there to be divisions between mayors and councils.
In Detroit? Are you
Yes,
kidding?
right. So first of all, I mean, I was not surprised. I think the perception of harmony has been good for the city, but I think it's been not quite as deep and intense as the narrative has provided. I was on a council for 16 years. I couldn't remember the number of times council voted something down, and the following week or 4 or 5 weeks later, boom, the 5 becomes a 6 or the 4 becomes a 5. So that's just how politics and public policy intersect at a local level of government. So I don't think too much should be made of this division. Certainly there's bridge building and bridge mending that always needs to be done. That's part of why you have an administrative staff on the 11th floor in this case, and on the 13th floor to kind of keep things going. So I think we shouldn't make too much of the trust.
There's a lot of different kinds of division that can develop, Stephen. Some of them are over policy. Some of them are over upcoming elections. And I understood that there were a number of people last week who were being polled in the city of Detroit asking if they would prefer Mayor Duggan or Mary Sheffield for mayor. So there's some polling going on.
Well,
is that playing into any of this at all?
It may be. I mean, certainly there's posturing, right? Political posturing going on both sides and on the council. I got to say, I'm proud of council for standing up and saying, hey, we have questions. We want them answered. They have every right to do that, and that's what we send them there to do. I have to say, though, that I can't view this through any other lens than through that of the neighborhood where I was born here in Detroit, where I operate a small nonprofit that's trying to make the neighborhood better. On our block, we have 14 abandoned houses. We were not eligible for demolition under the old money, the federal money that was here. This $250 million is the only hope that we would have had to get rid of those houses. And you could not go up and down our block and talk to anybody who would say we shouldn't take those houses down. At the same time, they watch the news, they see what's going on, they have questions about transparency, fairness, they have questions about debt for the city, and of course we have lots of other things in our neighborhood that need doing. I mean, it's people's lives that are in the most desperate need in Detroit, and tearing down houses isn't really fixing those issues. And I think we have a problem in the city of thinking that every solution we come up with has to solve everything. But it's still something we got to think about.
Take a whack at that.
Well, I appreciate you bringing the conversation back to where it belongs, which are there are people who are going to drive home tonight and they're going to park their house next to a vacant or abandoned house. And no matter what they do about the condition of their house, they may not be able to get insurance for their house because of that vacant house. So as long as that it remains at the center of the discussion and we're talking about how to do that better, I think we're going to continue to have the kind of partnership that we've enjoyed with council. And I think we got to keep bringing the conversation back there, because the more people talk about, what about this political consideration or this other one? I think as long as the issues about reform, improvement of the process, value for the citizens and their ROI for for the investment we're making, I think that we're going to come to a great place and begin to implement the improvements that are needed.
I just think that, Kat, if you're living next to this house that just came down, I don't know how much, when it finally, you've been waiting for years for it to come down, it's finally gone. I wonder how much you think about, if you're worried about transparency or about who got the contract. You just know that your neighborhood got better.
I think that's a great point. First of all, as a native Detroiter, I grew up next to a house that was blighted, so I know that personally what it's like to live next to an abandoned home, to see your neighborhood change so quickly over time.
Yeah.
That's damaging. But at the same time, a lot of the tips that I've received, a lot of the concerns that I've reported on over this past year have really been driven by residents as well. So while, yes, I think everyone, again, wants the blight removed, they want to see it come down, I don't think it's fair to assert that the only people that are raising concerns about this are the politicians. I do believe residents also have concern about transparency and making sure that the program is really run well.
Yeah.
So,
Sheila, this always feels like it comes with the territory. When you're talking about construction and contracts, and there just seems to be an unseemly part of it that always develops around it, and suspicions that it's not being done on the up and up, and there's a friends and family plan to it, all of that. Is there any way to do this cleanly?
Well, I think one of the issues is that for, I don't know, at least a generation, the city of Detroit has never had enough positions to do all the level of work that needs to get done at this really like micro level. I mean, there's only so many inspectors that you can hire, and they got to inspect 42 different things. Yeah. So there's some structural problems that are the result of literally the 50 years of disinvestment that we've all lived through, that culminated in bankruptcy, and we're coming back from now. But I also think, and this to me, I was paying sort of general attention to it, and then as it became more, I started calling, okay, what's going on here? And frankly, the framework that I started to hear more about was this resolution that was being proposed, this group, the 21, I forget the name of it, organizations who the city was interacting with, and literally, I think it's incredible to link demolition with rehabilitation in a way ing dollars that don't have all the restrictions that come with federal or state money. So to me, this is where we need to get the conversation back to, but I agree transparency is huge and needs to be part of the picture.
Devin, I was just going to add, I had a chance to write something this week, which is unusual for me, to just talk about how important it is, $250 million investment in the neighborhoods of the city, places that we have not yet been able to take action. I mean, in just about every one of the neighborhoods that's very severely distressed in the city, demolition and rehab together, and being able to take down some houses, then rehabilitate others, and extend the power of planning, not just to the areas that are strongest, is something that the resolution was going to allow. And I'd also mentioned that, Indian Village or West Village, in the last administration, they're talking about doing demolitions there. Can this neighborhood come back? Now everybody knows how that neighborhood can come back. It's come back incredibly strongly. So the ability to do that really starts with demo and ends with something like a strategic neighborhood fund announcement or something like that.
Steven, yeah, I mean, we don't use the word blight over on our block because it dissociates it from people and their lives. Our problem in Detroit is about people. We don't invest enough in our people, making sure they have opportunity and all the things that they need. That's the focus, and that's where I think the conversation has to focus, even as you talk about the need to take down houses. Yeah.
Great conversation, gang. Thanks so much for being here. Have a happy Thanksgiving this week. When we come back, mass transit back for another try. This is Flashpoint on Local 4.